Hello and welcome. So this is one of my 60 conversations, and I have the amazing, wonderful Dominic Scaffidi with me today. We were just having a little bit of a chat before I pressed record, and it's really, really funny because Dominic was supposed to be about one of my very early, particularly pretty much the first conversation of my 60 I was going to have. And as life and whatever it took over and what happened, it didn't end up happening that way. And this is pretty much now one of my last conversations. I was like, I have to connect with Dominic and get him in before we miss this entirely. So it is such an honor and a pleasure to be doing this and to be speaking to you, Dominic.
Thank you. I am honored to be one of the 60 conversations. And yes, the one we did end up having turned out on my YouTube channel to be the most popular, most views of any conversation. And so I'm excited for this one. That one resonated with so many people as you got to share more of your story and all of that. So it's all perfect, and I'm excited I didn't miss out on being one of the 60.
Yeah, me too, me too. So, just in case anyone doesn't know who you are, do you want to just give us a quick overview of who you are?
Mm,
Let's see where
yeah,
we.
yeah, very good. Well, I'm an executive coach by profession, so I have been self-employed for a little over 15 years. And I'm a master certified coach through the International Coaching Federation. And mostly I'm doing work with leaders in organizations. I work with leaders and teams. And so that's the bulk of the work that I do. And then the other thing, and I love Zoom with its AI
It's,
bubbles and stuff, and I haven't figured out how to turn it off, but I don't think it's possible. But so I love that. But the other important part of, I guess, what I do, I'm also deeply into a student of many spiritual teachings and understandings. And that's kind of how you and I met. I'm deeply immersed in the teachings of Sydney Banks and also the teachings of Abraham Hicks. And that understanding forms a grounding or foundation, really, for my life, but also professionally. It very much informs my style, my approach, the way that I work with others, supporting them through coaching.
Yes, and yeah, that is definitely how we connected through that. It was our lovely friend Jill Whalen. She said you have to speak to Dominic. You two have got so much in common. So
Yes.
with what we do, and so I am really, really fascinated. I mean, I feel like people have kind of got used to it now, but I know when you came along, you trundled into the three principles world and kind of said, well, actually, I think that Abraham is saying the same thing as Sid, you know, and it I'd love you to share a little bit about that because I know a lot of the time people think, I know for me, I love reading lots of different and, listening to, reading, connecting with a lot of different spiritual teachings. And I'm actually really very, very partial to reading the Bible. I love the Bible. I just think it's saying
Mm,
exactly what
mm.
Sydney Banks is saying. But very often, in these teachings, it can be this whole no, 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 this is what it is, and don't bring anything else in. So I would love to hear you share a little bit about how you so beautifully and seamlessly bring those two things together and make it all make sense.
Yeah, I mean it is so easy. It's effortless. And what makes it effortless is because it is the same. And so I used to say, I think they're saying the same thing. I think I'm hearing the same thing. And I no longer say that I think that. Now I can see, I've realized the pointing is to the same thing, the same place from two different perspectives. And the value I have seen from those specific perspectives has been incredible in the living of my life. Those specific two perspectives. I follow many teachings. I'm immersed in non-duality. I love Sadhguru. There's many other teachings, and I can hear. But I'm talking specifically those two, and why I emphasize the teachings of Sydney Banks and the teachings of Abraham Hicks, because the perspectives from which they describe the one thing that is going on, the truth of who we really are, our true nature, and the nature of reality. Sydney Banks is so pure and rigorous in his pointing to that truth. Now, all these teachings, you don't have it if you know the words that were used and all of that. Sid said that. It's not in my words. It's not in his writing. It's not in his talks. He was so clear. It was, the first time I heard with that kind of clarity, where he's like, if you hear something, and he was talking about, because you'd be listening to a tape of his maybe from when he's talking, and he says on this, if you're listening to this in your car and you hear something, you can hear what I'm saying or what I'm pointing to. He said, pop the tape out and throw it out the window, because that's all I'm saying. Any more than that, you'll get lost. You'll get lost in the words. My teaching is not in these words. It's what I point to. And Sid it's the best I've come across in terms of the purity, the rigor with which he's really, the biggest thing I got out of it is how he's really is that you're already there and there's nothing to do. And I'm like, but there gotta be, Sid, shouldn't I meditate, or isn't there some process so that I can see? And it's like, he's pointing to who you really are, your true nature, and the nature of reality. Well, exactly how much effort would it take to be who you really are? You are that already. It's a little bit twist your head in a knot. He's pointing to who you really are. Well, have you ever been other than who you really are? How exactly would you be anything other than who you really are? So it's it's hard to accept or hard to hear, but he does a great job of pointing continually directly and pointing you away from the distraction and nonsense of doing things to be you. It's all about realizing something. You just realize it, you'll see it, and everything you do will change from that realization. Everything will change. It never works in reverse. So really powerful. And Sid, one of the things he spoke a lot about is just the pure spiritual foundation, of our nature. And he talked about, there's the formless truth, the mind, the intelligence of all things. He spoke about the formless and the form. Right? We live our life in the form. We've got homes and businesses and all that is the form. And he said, but there's the formless and the form. And so the missing link, that's his, the title of the book, but he pointed, is the missing link between that spiritual energy and then the form is thought. So really rich teachings. Now, the other thing he said is none of that's true. I just love it because he's like, oh yeah, it's like this, and he uses all these words and it's like, yeah, but none of that's true. There's no such thing. There's not a formless and a form. And then he's like, no, it's the allness. I'm like, wait a minute, I was just getting my head around the formless and the form. And now you say that's not there. It's actually the allness. So anyway, really, really fun in that teaching to really, you can see something. But his direction is a very rigorous direction, a lot and helpful direction in what this spiritual essence or nature is. Abraham starts from a different place and looks in a different direction. The funniest way I could say this is that Abraham says, oh, yeah, that is so interesting. Who you really are, the spiritual truth of who you are. That is all so interesting. You will never get away from it because you cannot disconnect from it. And by the way, you have eternity for that exploration. You will never not be the truth of who you really are, your true nature, the nature of reality will never cease to be. So this is a wonderful exploration. And you will never get away from it. You can never not be that. That is where you come from. And then Abraham, they kind of like really take that starting point and then they say, what might be worth looking at is the fact that who you really are will lock that in. Who you really are is pure source energy consciousness. So who you really are is what Sid pointed to. Who you really are is a pure source energy consciousness. And a part of you has focused into this physical existence. So it's the same thing.
Yep.
A part of you focused into this physical existence while the greater part of you remains non-physically focused. So basically, you and I talking here are the tiniest speck of who we really are showing up here for this conversation, while the greater part of who we are remains non-physically focused. And there is no separation between that. And this is where Abraham says, yeah, you have eternity to explore that spiritual nature. And you focused here with intention. And you have but 100 precious years. It's my paraphrasing. You have but 100 precious years to experience this aspect of you, a precious aspect of who you really are. Who you really are is love. Who you really are is peace. Who you really are is joy. Who you really are is abundance. But you've been given this 100 years to love someone, to experience the joy of creating something, to experience and live inside the abundance that is your true nature. And Abraham will say, we think that's worth talking about. We think that is worth exploring. And that is not separate. And that is not looking in the wrong direction. We are looking in the same direction from a different perspective, because you cannot look in any direction and not find yourself. Any direction you look in this body, physically, looking at the relationships you are in, the business you've created, the world that you're living in, does not look in the wrong direction from who you are. That is the right direction. And the truth of you is found within it. And the discovery of who you really are is found in the living of your life, not in the withdrawal of your life, in an exploration of a spiritual reality which looks like it's separate from the reality you are living. There is no separation. So those two teachings are incredibly valuable and whole. They are all of it.
I just love that. And basically what I hear in that is, have fun whilst you are here being human. You are this, and I think it's really changed things for me having the realization, like you say, what Sydney Banks pointed to, the truth of who I am, that almost feels like, oh yeah, well, with that as a foundation, and then what Abraham's saying, wow, it's like being at a theme park or something, or a play park. It is like, okay, so what can we do then? What can we do? How far can we push this? And that is definitely, that's my favorite game. It's literally like, okay, if they're saying this and pointing towards okayness is in absolutely everything, because how can you get away from your spiritual nature? How can you get away from who you truly are? It'd be like trying to shake off your shadow. You can't. And so it's like, right, if I can't get away from that, and that is what is underpinning everything, what does that mean for what I can do in the world? And that's my favorite game. It's literally like, oh, okay, this looks impossible. Well, let's give it a go then, and let's see. Given what Sydney Banks is pointing to, given what Abraham is pointing to, the impossibility of this looks like something my finite mind has made up. So what if I, push the boundaries of that and see if it's made up, and what's the worst that can happen? I'll find out, oh yeah, I can't do it. Or maybe I will surprise myself and actually find delve a little bit, accidentally almost find more out about my true nature from that.
This is where it is in this playground that we get to experience who we really are, have the experience of knowing ourselves as the powerful, infinite creator that is who we really are. This is the playground where you get to know yourself as that, as the creator that is the truth of you, the creator of your own reality. You are the creator of your own reality. And this is the place where you get to create, to paint, to play. Sid was asked, it's unpublished right yet still. I had learned about this through conversations with Linda Kearing and Sherry Hickman. Linda Kearing was his first student. Sherry's probably third or fourth, early on before psychologists and all of that. So Sid had had his enlightenment experience. And Linda worked with Sid in the early days and wrote the first book of his teachings, and Island of Knowledge. I think that's the book. But anyway, it's her first book, and it was Sid's teachings. She would write on a pad as he would speak. She would write, and then they would together put it together to write. But there's unpublished materials, and I was on a webinar, and I had the opportunity to hear Linda and Sherry speak about some of these questions that were captured, questions asked of Sid, and they were written out. Well, and then they took these questions and Sid answered them, and they were, Linda would write them out. And this one question that got asked was, Sid, what is nature? And they, an interesting question, right? But so Sid, what is nature? And really the question was asking him about what is this world of form? What is nature, this physical world? What is it? And the answer is astonishing because Sid's response was nature is God's playground where God plays with thought. That's not quite the answer I was expecting to. It's like, what? Did you hear the question, Sid? What is nature? What is this physical reality? What is this world? And Sid says nature is God's playground where God plays with thought. There's nothing serious going on here. That is an Abraham quote. We're all making too much of all of this. There's nothing serious going on. Life is supposed to be fun. The purpose of life is joy. Nothing you do with thought. It's like an etch-a-sketch. Whatever you put on a etch-a-sketch is fine. You can enjoy that for 100 years. But it all just vanishes away anyway. And in reality, the more you understand about this, nothing that goes on in thought doesn't just erase and transform and come on top of it. But where we get in trouble, the only trouble we have is not realizing that. Mm-hmm. So what we don't realize that both Abraham and Sid do a great job of is that all that you are experiencing is simply the reflection, the projection and casting out of your own energies. That is what you're living inside of. You are living inside your own mind, interacting with your own thoughts. You know, I think that I'm married, and I have been for 30 years, to my wife, Kitza. And there's plenty of evidence to say that this
I've met her.
Well, you've met her. Yeah. So you've met her. So there is a lot of evidence to say that this is the truth. Mm. And I know, like, I could hear her walking around, and I've run into her several times if we're, at home, right, together and stuff. But that is like on an obvious level that way. But then there's also the truth of knowing that who I know to be my wife and who I have a relationship with is the Kitza, the one that exists in my mind, made of my own thinking. And what's valuable about this is if she ever causes me trouble.
I'm sure she doesn't. I'm sure that could never happen. But let's pretend it might be able to. Go on.
it turns out there is so much value in realizing that when the one that appears out there that seems to be causing you trouble, there's something about understanding that, but that cannot be. Yeah. Because I am not interacting with the one that is out there, because we can't even be sure there is one. The one I'm interacting with every single day and every moment of thinking of my relationship is the one that exists for me in my thinking. So when that one causes me trouble, it is a trouble constructed of my own thoughts. And the one that appears to be out there is a perfect mirror reflection of these vibrations and thoughts which exist within me, who's doing me the favor of reflecting back to me what's going on with me. The same thing is true of my business. The same thing is true of any important area of my life. I think I have problems over here. And the only problems I have are the conflicts that exist within the thinking I have about anything that's important to me.
I think a realization, I mean, I know from personal experience, even the slightest glimpse and realizations of that are complete and utter game changers.
Mm,
I think most of the time in the world, when things go wrong within a relationship, it'll be, yeah, well, there is some blame on that person. And if that person could change and do this, it would be helpful. And really seeing actually, I think it's just so freeing on every level to really see actually, if you change, if you see something different, if you have a realization of this, that's more than enough. Because like you say, all that person out there can ever be is a reflection of what's going on inside of you. And if
mm,
that shifts inside of you, I mean, I've seen this, I mean, I just call it recreating people because it just, that's what it feels like. But it is like, okay, if I go inside and see something different, and you can really, the thing is, like, you know, with your lovely Kitza, if there was a moment when she was annoying you, I'm sure somebody else would not find what she was doing annoying. And you know, this is the other kind, these are clues as well, aren't they? Because it's like, okay, so it's annoying you, but this, it's not annoying in and of itself, because if it was annoying in and of itself, everybody would feel the same. Everybody ever saw her doing whatever it was would feel annoyed. And yet that's not how it works either. So these are things that kind of give you
yes.
clues. Okay, well, maybe it's to do with me. And we nearly always, all of us have a one person or one thing or one situation or one thing that we, you know, either can't get past or feel annoyed by or this sort of thing. And then, but other people are just like, so what? So what? And so it's like, oh gosh, yeah, this
Well,
in me.
and what I love about what you're saying is that what the other is doing that someone else would not find annoying, you also have to really confront that there are times I'm finding that cute. Isn't that cute? It's so cute. You know what I really love about her? So cute when she does this. It's just the cutest little thing. You know what I really get annoyed by? Is when she does that. Wait a minute. You just said the same thing, didn't you? You just said the same thing. And by the way, when I'm coaching, in case anybody thinks, like I'm as a coach, I'm also like very practical. And because of the clients I deal with, I'm talking about this has to be practical
Gosh, yeah.
and literally you need to see results in the world.
Yes. Yes.
That's another kind of difference I see, that some can be satisfied with quiet your mind, deepen your understanding, feel that sense of peace, reconnect with your spiritual nature, and think that they're done. That's not what a whole person is.
No.
A whole person is. And now, can we talk about your business?
Yeah.
And now, can we talk about your relationship? Because you're a whole person. You're not this spiritual entity.
For
And
me,
you
it's
are a spiritual entity that is physically manifested, that is physically focused. So, in fact, when we talk about this physically focused you, we are talking about the whole of you. If we were not talking about the whole of you, we'd be dealing with a corpse, because we'd be dealing with a dead body without life in it. But we're not. We're talking about an alive you. And because we're talking about alive you, that is a spiritual energy focused as a human being. And that is one whole person. But I wanted to get to the practicality, because when I'm coaching, there's something magical that happens from this understanding. So I get a client who will say, my boss drives me nuts because they're a micromanager, and that's not my thinking. This has nothing to do with my thinking because you can do, I'll do 360 interviews too. And so they'll say, yeah, perfect. Because when you talk to everybody else, you're going to hear the same thing. So they're a micromanager. They have a terrible way of leading. And that's what my problem is. They're, in fact, the worst boss I've ever had. And not my thinking. This is like the truth of it. And so as we proceed in the coaching, and yes, it's obvious there's plenty of evidence that the manager is a particular way. But what happens is, as the person stops worrying about their boss, because this is sort of like, this is what the insanity is of what we do, is I look in a mirror and I see an issue, and now I'm obsessed with what there is in the mirror that must be fixed. So, I mean, look at that. This, like, some facial expression, whatever the hell it is, that's just wrong and should be changed. And then I'm like trying to figure out how to get it changed. And it escapes me that there's nothing to do out there.
Yeah.
Which sounds like the most stupid, impractical teaching. What do you mean there's nothing to do out there? I want coaching because I want to know what to do out there. And with my clients, they're, very special clients who end up picking me because if they're not resonant with this kind of direction, they'll pick a better coach, one who is going to speak to them about the reflection in the mirror. And there's a lot of them. And so those coaches can help with the reflection, and they can help with your strategies and your plans and all that. But with my clients, I distract them from this apparently practical subject of what there is that needs to be fixed in the reflection that they are literally experiencing. And we point to its source, and its source being within them. And what's crazy is that as the clarity settles for them around their own inner conflict, around not being trusted, and not, and somebody second guessing you, which are old thoughts and conditioned thinking that who knows where the hell it came from, but you've been carrying it and carrying it and carrying it, and insisting that people don't value you and people don't recognize you, and whatever thoughts you've been carrying around. But what happens is it's those thoughts that your boss aligns with. Yeah. And they behave that way. Well, what happens is, as that clears up, yes, magically, without us ever talking about the boss and never talking about any strategies with which you can improve the relationship improves. And the boss stops micromanaging. And the boss turns into the most supportive and empowering boss ever. And what's difficult for the clients I work with is that, of course, their colleagues say, no, he hasn't changed. You are delusional.
Yes.
He has not changed. You're
Yeah.
delusional. What kind of a coach were you working with? This is all bypassing. This is exactly what they call spiritual bypassing. Now you are ignoring the very problems that you should be facing. And so the colleagues and others who they've been engaging with that thinking will think, they've gone nuts. This is insane. That coach or whatever has put them into la la land. But it's not la la land. Your reality transforms, and it transforms effortlessly, not by your action.
Yeah, I love that.
Action is always involved. That's a paradox. That's a paradox. Your action is never creating anything. Your action creates nothing. that you desire creates nothing in the world. And in everything created in the world, action is always involved. And that is not the creator. Something deep to see in that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Because what I see in that is as things clear up inside us and we see something different, even if we take the same action, the energy
Well said.
is different.
Well said.
I can really, I know that within myself. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this same thing. But what I am doing feels like something entirely different, even though it is the same thing when the mess or whatever you want to call it inside you has been cleared up. And one of the things for me that I love about these teachings, and I love how clearly you articulate it and share it, is when I came into these teachings, I needed and I wanted something practical. You know, it's all very speaking about fluffy things and, you know, all of this and spirituality and all of that kind of stuff. But like you say, when we have a life and families and jobs and children and a million things, which we all have, whatever, wherever we are, we have lots and lots going on. When we had that, to me, it definitely wasn't enough to just have a spiritual. I love the spiritual, you know, that journey and exploring it and finding out about it. But that would not have kept me engaged. It has to be, you know, actually, I love being human. I really, really enjoy being human. I love creating stuff. I love doing stuff. And if it hadn't have helped me in that, if exactly what you're saying, you know, if I hadn't have, because I spent so much time thinking it was other people or circumstances or those kinds of things, and thinking that's what needed to change, and just continually coming up against brick walls because people don't like, even when you completely point out to them what they're doing wrong, they are not very good at just changing. And yeah, seeing that. So to come across something that is so practical, actually, that, as you said, you know, with just looking at it and allowing yourself to see something, everything changes. And yeah, and then whether it is your actions are the same and
Yes.
or whatever, but yeah.
I think what you said is a great place to notice the power of that. The actions, the same actions, creating a different result, right? And we can go to such minor, tiny little action. Like, in other words, something goes on, and I don't know why. Again, in coaching, is like, my job is stressful, and they're taking advantage of me because I'm the one, because I do get things done, and they load me up with all the responsibility and all the tasks, and they're favoring others who are less competent or less willing to work. And so this is what my problem is. This is not my thinking. This is going on around. So now, this is how subtle it is that you get a request. So you're in a reality, that's your reality. You get a request, and let's use the same action. You get a request to which you say no, and then the pressure gets put on to ultimately get you to do that. Right? Now, coaching and the conversation can go in one of two directions. Well, the direction it's likely to go in is, tell me about this environment, tell me about the characters in it, tell me about that, because clearly you need some new behaviors here, because you're going to have to get control over this. You're going to need to control a bunch of other people. You know what your problem is? You're just not a strong enough leader. I'm so glad that we're working together because clearly you're not a strong enough leader. And I'm your coach, and we're going to change you into something, right? And like, because you got to get a handle on this, you're going to have to get control over this, etc. That is the direction of most coaching. We're going to give you more effective behaviors. Do you know what a better behavior would be? Is when this happens, let's talk about it. Maybe we'll practice it too. So you can do it's like this is the direction. It's all about the mirror. It's all about the reflection. It's all of that. What happens is in this kind of understanding is when you clear up the turbulence and conflict of your own thinking that is opposing yourself. You are dealing with your own conflicting thoughts and feelings. After, they still come to you and they still have stuff for you to do. And you say no, and they go away. That's it. So, because
Yeah.
when you say no, which is the exact same behavior that you were doing before, so nothing has changed. The same behavior has power in the world. So you cannot control other people. You cannot control the world. A lot of that misunderstanding, I get a lot of it from people who think I'm talking about you create your own reality. Good. That's what I need. I need a coach who's I create my own reality. That's what I'm gonna do. Right? And it's like you create your own reality, but I'm only describing what's already happened. I'm not going to be teaching you how to create your own reality. I'm not that good. I'm not that good, right? What I'm simply describing is the truth that you are creating your own reality. You always were and forever shall be creating your own reality. What it is some conversation to deepen the understanding that that's what happens. And what happens is that you are dealing with what appears to be a reality, which are simply energies that are always in response to your energy and your tone. And so when we say you create your own reality, we're simply describing that the tone that is you, with this pure source energy light coming through you, through these energies and vibrations that exist in you, which is really through your thinking, is cast out and reflected into the world that is you. It is creating the reality that you're living in. So when we say you create your own reality, this isn't anything you're doing, and it's nothing you learn to do because you can't do this. This is simply what's happening. So as energy shift in you, the whole creation changes. And now the reality that is yours is shifting. Your business is different. People are registering. The financial scenario is abundant. Everything is changing, but everything is changing in response to what's been achieved or accomplished or allowed. It's a much better word. To what's been allowed within you. And how do you allow something within you? How do you allow your joy? How do you allow your abundance? Well, it's sourced in you. It's flowing through you. How do you allow it? It's by not resisting it. You don't do anything other than when you stop resisting the life force that flows through you, you are allowing it. But what free will is, unlike animals and is you don't have to. That's what free will is. You don't have to. You don't have to allow your well-being. You don't have to allow your joy. You don't have to allow your true nature, which is abundance. You don't have to allow peace to flow through you so you can experience it. You don't have to. That's what free will is. You can instead engage and focus in a way that disturbs you. You can, and no one can stop you. There is no power that can have you be in a scenario where you cannot focus any way you please. Viktor Frankl proved it.
Yeah.
There is nothing that can go on that has you be in a scenario where you cannot focus and connect and feel the truth of who you are. He proved it. He's in a Auschwitz. He's in a concentration camp, and he makes the statement, "I was more free than the prison guards." That is crazy talk. But it was an experience and a realization. He said, "I realized I was more free than the prison guards. They were more imprisoned and suffering in their state. They certainly imprisoned him and caused all kinds of physical suffering. But he, in spite of those conditions, was able to find his well-being, his thriving. And it's the reason he survived and thrived, whereas many went into a darker state. And just under horrible conditions and understandably, innocently followed into a much darker focus, which took them down a different path.
Yeah. And it is interesting because you can understand, when like you say, when people come for coaching or people talk to you and sometimes they'll tell you a situation, it's totally understandable, the reactions and what is going on, and why they think what they think and why they think it's their boss or their partner or whatever. It's totally understandable. But then it is, I guess, having, like you say, we have the free will to see past that. And if we are prepared to look, if we are ready and want to and are prepared to see past it. Because I can remember somebody trying to teach me about boundaries. And I know this is a really
yes.
interesting, it's a really interesting subject, but I know, so having it was, I'd been in the women's refuge, and then they were trying to help and what have you, and they were kind of like, you wouldn't get into these situations if you had better boundaries. And exactly like you're saying with the coaching and everything, all like what it looks like, how you would create a boundary outside. I was given all the, you'll do this, you'll say this, you'll act like this, you'll do this, and it was like impossible. Even when I'm listening there, even when I'm sitting there, I'm kind of nodding and smiling and doing all of the right things, thinking, you have not got a hope in hell that I'm going to do any of that. I knew I wouldn't. It's just like, it can't happen. It can't. Not with who I am. And I didn't realize that at the time, but I'm kind of going, oh yeah, great idea. Oh yeah, great idea, great idea. And inside my head, absolutely no freaking way on this planet is that happening. And then as I started to understand this and stuff inside me started to change, exactly like when you were saying that the scenario that you use with that guy, someone comes up and tells you to do this thing and you say no, and nobody, and this is the thing with the boundary, it doesn't matter what you say or what you do. If who you are being is walk all over me, if your energy is walk all over me,
yes,
that's what you're going to get, no matter what you do, no matter what actions you take. The minute you have a realization, you don't even have to say or do anything. It's just not going to happen because there's something different. Who you are, the energy you're giving out is different.
And that reflection must change
Yeah.
because you cannot experience what you are not a match to.
Yeah, totally.
You
Totally.
cannot
Yeah.
experience it.
No.
You cannot
Either way,
experience what
either
you
way.
are not vibrating with. You cannot experience what you are not
No.
tuned to. If you are not tuned to the classical music station, you cannot experience it. If you are on AM talk radio, you cannot experience classical music coming in. It is a physical impossibility. And so I love that you brought up that point about boundaries, because imagine the time spent in understanding something called boundaries, in figuring out and learning how to create healthy boundaries, right? Oh, sorry, how to create boundaries, but then that's not enough. Let's complicate it a little with healthy boundaries. So you learn to create boundaries. Let's talk about healthy boundaries. And and so on and on. And let's learn about boundaries, which are some nothing but machinations of thinking and playing and all that. Whereas from an understanding of, no, I said no. No, no boundary is required. And by the way, if you keep requesting when I said no, that's just funny.
Yeah.
It's it's
Yeah.
not anything other than that. It's
Yeah.
just funny, right? Like it's interesting,
Mm,
and it's got nothing to do. There's nothing required of me
mm.
because I said no. No boundaries required. Like there's no sitting down and say, Deborah, I've got to talk to you because this doesn't work. And I need to tell you how to communicate with me. I've got to lay down the what you can do and what you can't do with me. We're going to set some boundaries here. This is crazy talk.
Yeah.
You are not the ruler of the universe, and you do not rule other people, and you do not control anyone. You find that alignment within you, and that emanates from you. What matches that will show up in your reality. And what doesn't match that is repelled from interaction with you. It cannot get near you. And so, even people who may be annoying, untrusting, micromanagers who continue to be that way cannot be that way with you because it doesn't match. It doesn't match. It's kind of like people are fine. They would be going in one ear and out the other. It was be like you'd be talking to me, but it's all going in, and I'd be looking at you like out of a curiosity, like how interesting that you're asking for all this detail because I'm not about to give it to you. And can we talk about what you actually really need? Right? Which is, are you asking me to own this? And do you want to be kept up to date? Or what is it? Because you're not telling me what to do. Basically, we are in our very energy showing the world how to interact or treat us. And, these words are terrible because we're not showing anybody anything. We're simply, we are simply being that.
Yeah.
And that's all that is showing back to us that we then start to experience. So that boss does come back and behaves entirely differently with you than they would with someone else.
Yeah. You can really, really see that as well. You can really see the evidence, when you were saying about the different styles of coaching and saying actually, if we try to deal with the mirror, and I know people do that with the best will in the world,
Yes.
but it's the real change happens when we deal with what's going on inside and change. Because on both sides, I can see how we can only do what makes sense to us. And so again, when you come back to the like setting boundaries, it's like Even if you know that your safety depends on it, if you haven't seen something that makes sense to you, you can't do it. You can't. It's as simple as that. Like I watched my children do things that I knew were dangerous in the situation that we were in, but they couldn't do anything different because that's what was making sense to them. And no amount of saying, look, do this instead of this, be quiet in this time instead of doing this, wouldn't make any, zero difference, zero difference. Intelligent human beings who can, zero difference. And like beginning to see and understand this, it's like, oh yeah, because of whether you call it their levels of consciousness, their levels of understanding, whatever you. And then as you know, as they have understood and seen something different, it's just like, wow, with no telling whatsoever, they act differently. So it 100% it is the the juice of it, if you like, is seeing that and understanding that and pointing to what Abraham shares, pointing to what Sydney Banks shares, in my experience, really helps to open people's eyes to seeing that. So
this is where I appreciate how Abraham says, I laugh when they say this because they'll say words don't teach. It's odd we use so many. Because if you've ever listened to Abraham, oh my God, they use so many words, right? They're like really a lot of words. But what they say is words don't teach. It's odd we use so many. Only your own life experience can teach you. Only your own life experience can teach you. So you and I are talking about this. We're kind of pointing to something. It's all bullshit, right? It's like when it's words, it's just bullshit. It's like, oh yeah, they said this thing about that if I shift and change, then the others will change. And they said if I'm in abundance, then I will notice like my financial situation will change. Oh yeah, right. So, but that's all words, and the words of that are really just point to some belief system. If you were to follow a belief, right? It's like, so there's a different belief. They said you gotta like think a certain way and then change your state and whatever. But what happens is if you can instead in your own life notice things, well, my boss was doing that, but there was one project they weren't doing that. So if it's them, like how come they're not always the same way? Or I do see what they do over there, but that's not actually what they do with me. Well, what explains this? So in other words, the truth of if what we're saying is true, then the truth of it will be everywhere in your life. And if what we're saying is bullshit, then you don't have to worry about it because you're never going to see this. It's just not going to happen, right? It's all not true. But when it's true, what it is about true, when it's a principle, when it is a universal law, it is constant and inviolable and invariable, like a gravity, just like we've never been taught through classes about how to work with gravity and manage it here and in order to really learn how to be with gravity. We never had to because we've never been without it. It is constant. It is a force. It is a field, and it's always here. And we live according to the truth of it. And really doesn't even feel like we're doing anything. Like if you ask me, say, so, or I'll ask you, so Deborah, by the way, what strategies have you come up with when it comes to gravity and what are better ways and worse ways, because I don't know if I'm doing it right, but what are you doing, right? It's like nobody talks about this. Nobody has these conversations because life shows you how it works. And then from the truth of how life shows you, you now live according to your understanding. Your understanding. This is why, our approach, and, when you and I are working with others, our approach always moves in the direction of deeper understanding. If you have trouble out here, and the thing in coaching is they always come with this thing that this is a problem and I want to do that and whatever the challenge is, will be resolved in the direction of a deeper understanding. Because from a deeper understanding, then this will dissolve. Yeah. This issue will dissolve. And if instead we look at the issue a little bit more to try to figure out what to do about it, you will contort yourself to try to make some sort of change and not see anything different. You will not have any better understanding, and you'll be spending your life trying to twist and turn and change what you're doing and like at this and try to get them to behave different and then stand on your head so they stop that. Like,
yeah.
It's like, it's not that complicated.
No. Which is kind of why you have to just have a go at something that occurs to you, don't you? That's the whole human bit in a way, I guess. It's like, yeah, just get in there and give it a go. Give it a go. I am aware of the time, and I could talk to you forever and ever and ever, but that has been amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love the way that you talk about this. I just love the way that you articulate. So thank you so much. If people did want to know a bit more about you, where is the best place for them to find you, to connect with you? What?
Yeah. Well, what I've done is with my website, I've kind of put that as a place. So it's just my name, right? So dominicscaffidi.com. And then from the website, it contains many talks, and they're all not all free. So many free resources on there, and then there's a few things where I offered that you can buy, but you don't need to. So you go there, and there's endless amounts of this. And then from there, it'll link to a YouTube channel, and it'll link to a Facebook group called Ask and It Is Given, How Thoughts Become Things. And I'm always on there and quite active and engaging. In
highly recommend joining the Facebook group. It's great fun.
Yeah. So that's the best place, and they'll learn about me and be able to reach out if they want, or in the meantime, so many resources they'll find right there.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for this great conversation. As always, it was so much fun. I love connecting with you in this way. So thank you.
Same, Deborah. Thank you very much. Thanks for this invitation. Wonderful.